How many light bulbs are there in Bangkok? Now you must be thinking, what? So this is actually a really common question that gets asked in a ton of strategy and consulting interviews. And it's actually one of my most favorite interview questions. Now we know that interviews are incredibly important to assessing the qualities of a candidate to ensure that they can drive the most impact for your business. So this is a simplified version of that particular question. This isn't the question I ask in interviews, but it's very similar. And basically we want to be able to assess people to be able to think critically, think of a logical approach to answering a really vague question. Today I'm going to talk about how I approach my thinking process when I get asked questions like, how many light bulbs are there in Bangkok? And this might be something you use in your own interviews when assessing candidates. I think it's really great to assess on-the-spot thinking and someone's ability to actually think critically and not just throw out guessing. My name is Mark. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Primal. We do $14 million in revenue per year, and we have around 160 people working in our company. So in order to be able to create and build a great team, you need to be able to ask the right questions during interviews to ensure that you're finding great people. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I approach this particular question. So if you get asked these market sizing type questions in interviews, you'll be better informed on how to answer them. And if you're a business owner, then you may use this interview question to assess candidates. So the first step when we look at answering this type of question is we want to be able to ask clarifying questions. Because it's super vague, we need to be able to pinpoint exactly what we're trying to calculate and discover. Here are some things that I think about when I get asked questions like this. So the first is to clarify, right? What does Bangkok mean? Bangkok is a very large city. Is it inner Bangkok? Is it outer Bangkok? What kind of light bulbs, right? Because we get light bulbs inside and we get street light bulbs. So we want to be able to clarify what type of light bulbs. We also want to look at how we can segment the market, right? Also, when we look at the households that have light bulbs, we want to understand, is it occupied households or is it unoccupied households? What are we looking at exactly? So the next part is once you've asked clarifying questions to really determine what you need to be calculating and thinking through. This is basically the steps to go through. So the first one is you need some kind of anchored data. When you think about anchored data, it's just something to be able to plug into your formula to calculate this as a starting point. Now, you might use information like population size as a starting point to begin trying to work out how many light bulbs there are in Bangkok, and then applying some assumptions so that you can get to the answer. So what's really important with questions like this is that it's not really about the correct answer, but it's your thinking process. It's how you explain your thought process as well, and how you basically come up with some kind of answer that could be close to the actual answer.
So I just wanted to take a moment to pause the video and let you know that I'm relatively early in my YouTube journey, and I would really appreciate it that if you like the content, please give it a like and subscribe. All right, that's it, back to the video.
So the next part is to apply segmentation, which I'll go through. You want to then create a formula and then determine some assumptions, do the math, and then check with the interviewer, what they think and if there's anything else that they need to explain to you or for you to explain to them. So the first part is really to think about the size of Bangkok. So we might know this information already, especially if you live in the city. And in this case, let's just say it's around 10 million for simplicity. Because I know back in, I think it was 2021, the population was roughly 9 million. So it's potentially grown since then. Now, the next part is we want to be able to determine, we have a total population size, okay? Well, now we need to think about, okay, how many households are there? Look at a metric like average people per household. So let's just say most people in Bangkok maybe are a couple, have one kid, you have older people, you have younger people. So we can also make an estimate here. So the next part is to actually look at the average people per household. So when I think through, okay, we know population size, we could potentially estimate how many households there are. So just jumping back to how do we segment, right? So what does Bangkok mean? Let's just say that it's inner Bangkok. What kind of light bulbs? Let's just say it's residential. How can we segment? Well, when I think of residential households, right, we have homes and we have condos. Inside or outside, it's basically inside the house, and are they occupied or not occupied, right? Let's just say it's occupied. So when we think about answering these questions, it's actually much more clear for us, right? It's how many light bulbs inside households that are occupied in Bangkok is the number that we need to figure out. Let's just say for simplicity purposes, the average people per household is 2.5 and the population is 10 million, okay? So we've figured out what the formula is, which is size of Bangkok population divided by average people per household. We then multiply it by the ratio of homes to condos. Now, let's just say that Bangkok is high density, right? Because the land is expensive and there's less homes because it's a very developed city. Let's just say that condos represent 80% of occupied residential areas in Bangkok, and homes roughly around 20%. This is just an assumption. Once we figure that out is, okay, we'll have the distribution of number of households times the percentage or ratio of homes to condos. And then we can start to make estimates around the number of light bulbs per home or per condo. So I used to live in a home, now I live in a condo. And if I just make some rough estimates as to how many light bulbs there were in my house at the time, I would say that there were around 40 light bulbs in the household. And then the number of light bulbs per condo, because generally they tend to be a bit smaller. Based on the size of my condo, I would estimate that we have around 30 light bulbs. So we basically come up with anchor data, which is the population size, which I know. We then apply segmentation, so looking at houses and condos, and the segmentation of whether it's inside or outside, and whether it's residential or commercial or both. So it's residential. We then create the formula, determine some assumptions. So I've just come up with the numbers, and now it's really time to do the math. Okay, so I've basically run the math. So we have 10 million people in Bangkok, divided by 2.5 average people per household. We end up with around 4 million. We multiply the 4 million by 20%. We end up with around 800,000 homes. And then we multiply the 4 million by 80%. We end up with around 3.2 million condos. Okay. We then take those two numbers, multiply it by each, and we then end up with, so we multiply the 800K by 40, the 3.2 million by 30. We end up with 32 million light bulbs in homes and 96 million light bulbs in condos. Okay. And then it's just a matter of summing this up. Okay, so adding these two together, we end up with around 128 million light bulbs. And so you're basically running through your thinking throughout all of this. You're making some assumptions. You have some anchor data based in factual information. And now would be a good time to actually, once you walk through this, is to actually ask the interviewer to give feedback, right? What do they think? They might even ask you, or a good question an interviewer should ask is, what do you think about this? And it forces them to think more deeply. Basically, what this will end up doing is, if the candidate is a strong candidate, they might start talking in more detail. These are based on some assumptions. If I really wanted to go figure out the actual number, I mean, it's probably nowhere close to this actual number, but because it's based on assumptions, if we were to actually grab or look at consensus data to see what this actual number was, if we actually looked at how many occupied homes there are in the city, we can then start to fact check, gather primary data, and make this a lot closer to the actual number. That's really how to approach this particular interview question. It's one of my favorite interview questions, and it really shows the candidate's ability to think through things critically and provide a logical framework in order to answer a very, very vague question. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you.